Okay, so it's everybody's favorite time now, YOLO time, the crazy hand of the week. Here it is, the six. It just looks like a crazy hand, doesn't it? 6-8 off. I mean, it just looks like something's going to happen, doesn't it? So we see a 2.5x on the button. We could 3-bet at a small frequency. Most of the time we'll be calling, and that's what I do here. We get a decent flop for our range. We'll have some 2-pair combos, and it's pretty drawy, but it's okay for our opponent too. They'll have an equity advantage by a few percent, I suspect. And they'll have, therefore, entitlement to cbet at a pretty high frequency. And on boards like this, where it's a little bit connected and drawy as well, they'll probably go with a larger size. And that is indeed what they do. Well, they go half pot, so it doesn't seem too bad. So in this instance, given the fact that the general population tendency is to over c-bet on boards like this, I did opt to hit them with a check raise. Now, as you know, I love check raising flops. I must admit, though, this particular combination is one that I would probably call most of the time with, or perhaps just check raise it more frequently when I have a diamond to go, the 8 of diamonds. But I did check raise it this time, and I don't mind it because a lot of the time we'll just pick up the pot instantly, which is good because certainly there's lots of bad turn cards, and we will have the best hand on the flop a lot of the time. And we do have a backdoor straight as well, so I think it's okay, but it's kind of a low frequency play for me. Our opponent does call in this instance. I think we all knew that was going to happen. And we do get a pretty good turn card. We'll hit our opponent a little bit, I guess. They'll have a few 7, 9, 8, 9 type combos. But it's not too bad because it does give us a little bit of... it gives us the straight draw as well now. If we hit a 7 on the river. It doesn't really make too much point to bet here, though, does it? We thought we probably had the best hand on the flop. I think this hand is a little bit too good to turn into a bluff here and try and blast our opponent off some better hands. So I check, hoping that we still have the best hand and we can get to showdown. Our opponent could still sometimes have a hand like ace-king with a diamond, or maybe a flush draw, or maybe a 5x type hand. So on the queen on the end, I decide to check, and you know what time it is. YOLO time. 5 times pot, all in. I have gone for it. So here's the thing. We do have a kind of... our opponent probably doesn't play 7-8 and take this line that often, but we do block the straight, the jack-8 as well. And we do block 2 pairs and trips. And we could sometimes have king-jack and take this line or jack-8. That's possible. Or get a little bit tricky with some, a set or something. It's kind of unlikely, but yeah, we could do it. The thing is, though, I just don't think this opponent will ever call. Because to call, they need to really have king-jack, and the only king-jacks I think they call a flop check raise with is diamonds, maybe spades, and the same goes for jack-8. That's like 2 or 3, maybe 4 combos max. And when you consider all the other combos they can have just being on the button, I just don't think they're ever calling here. Very, very small frequency. They're not going to call with 2 pairs. And unless they rivet a set of queens, which I guess as well, that's a few combos they can have, most of the time they're just going to be folding. Now, it's true, we could have had the best hand. They did fold. They did think for a short time and fold, so... But certainly a bit of a YOLO there, 5 times pot. Let's just see how crazy that was. I've just run this in Pio. So I've put in the button range here, pretty standard button range, although it's worth noting that might not be opening as wide as we would. Obviously, we'd be 3-betting some good stuff as well as a sprinkling of semi-bluff type hands. Looks good. Put that in, and on the flop, just talk a little bit about the flop. So naturally, we're going to check it over to our opponent, and they're going to be betting 70%, which, as I said, they'll be betting a lot. And just have a quick peek, actually, at the equities. They've got 54%. We've got 46%. So, like I said, they've got a few percent equity advantage. But in position, of course, they're going to be realizing a lot more equity than... the EV is going to be a lot higher than ours. Fairly significant, actually, but that's not too surprising. We've seen that before. So they are entitled to cbet at a pretty high frequency, 70%. And like I said, they should be going with the bigger size because of the texture of the flop. They went half pot. They could go a little bit bigger than that, but it seems okay. So they bet, and we raised to 303. Now, this is the thing where I don't think... this is their calling range against a check raise, and I don't think they're going to be calling like Pio thinks they are with all their king jacks, and some jack eights as well are in there where they've got the backdoor flush. I don't think most opponents call on a 5-6-10 with jack eight with one diamond against a check raise on the flop. I certainly don't see that much of that sort of stuff. So I think a lot of those combos are actually folded, which gives a lot more merit to our play, because after they call the check raise and then on the 9 it goes check, check, and then the river's the queen and we check it over to our opponent and they fire the fairly big size bet. Pio actually does like to YOLO. Some people think this is pretty crazy, but GTO solvers do some pretty crazy shit. And this is no exception. I have put in the all-in bet, and we're seeing it. We're seeing it being used, albeit only a couple % of the time. But I don't do this play very often, and all of the times we've seen it recently, it's worked. So as long as you're very careful with it, and in this particular instance, I don't mind it. Pio likes to use the jack blocker a little bit more, but like I just said, it anticipates our opponent calling the check raise on the flop with more jack X combos than they are. So I really kind of question the relevance of the jack blocker, and I think that it's okay to use this type of hand that we used. Again, just at a very low frequency, you've got to be careful with this sort of play. But you can see that Pio does like to check raise the combo that we had, but it just doesn't go the crazy size 5 times pot. It does that with a few different hands. But given the nature of the player pool and how I think they respond to our flop check raise, I do think maybe shifting from a jack X down to some of these types of hands with the bigger size, it's not a bad thing. And so sometimes it's good to YOLO.